Seiko Sewagwego, Amanda Jungyats, Akwesasne Ganyigahaga Niwakujoran. Hi, everyone. My name is Amanda. I'm Akwesasne Mohawk. I want to welcome you and thank you for joining us today to discuss our 2025 competition for the Professional Development Program training grants. So thank you so much. I also want to take some time to introduce some of my colleagues and the other program officers that are here today. So I'd like to welcome to Donna Sabis-Burns, the Office of Indian Education Discretionary Program Group Lead. And we also have Linda Brake, who is the Program Officer for our Professional Development Program. And as I said before, I'm Amanda Casali, Program Officer for your STEP and ARP AIR grants as well. Okay, so I also want to go over a little bit about our leadership here. We want to acknowledge our amazing leadership that we have here. Julian Guerrero Jr., he joined the department back in August of 2020 as the OIE director and has been hooked on helping the OIE grow and strengthening its capacity, collaboration, and constituent services to our grantee communities. Just next to his photo is Ruth Ryder. And Ruth is the Deputy Assistant Secretary for the Office of Policy and Programs for Formula Grants in the Office of Elementary and Secondary Education, or OESE. And the U.S. Department of Education. OESE implements programs to support underserved students across and under the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, or the ESEA. And in this role, Ms. Ryder oversees a broad range of management, policy, and program functions related to formula and discretionary grant programs under the ESEA. So I just want to go over a little bit of logistics for the presentation today. Everyone will be muted, so all participants will be muted throughout the presentation. We do encourage you, though, to ask questions. So to ask any question, we ask that you just type your question in the chat box, which is at the bottom of the screen, and make sure that you just click enter. If for some reason you are disconnected from the webinar, you could just reach out and contact the OIE Technical Assistance Team, which you can reach them by emailing them at oie@seisservices.com. And that email should be added, I'll just say it one more time, seisservices.com. A hard copy of this webinar can be downloaded, and the webinar will also be posted on the OIE website as well. We do have an agenda, and so we're going to start off today with our PD training, PD grant competition overview. So we have a lot to cover today. We're going to then take you through eligibility, absolute, competitive, preference priorities, selection criteria, relation between absolute priority, selection criteria in the application, and the use of a logic model in building project narratives. And then lastly, we will go over the resources that are available to you. And here are the webinar objectives. So we just want to make sure that everyone learns what's in the 2025 grant application package. We want to make sure you understand that what the application requirements are. We want you to understand the selection criteria and understand what type of forms are required. Also, we want you to understand common components of applying for federal grants and using the federal application systems, as well as to provide prospective applicants with the opportunity to submit questions to OIE. And we just want to make sure, please note that this webinar presents a portion of the required information available about the grant competition. So for full details, please be sure to read the NIA, the notice inviting applications. Make sure you're reading the application package and the correction notice, which was published on April 3rd, 2025. And always, please remember to follow all instructions on grant.gov. So I'm going to pass it over to Linda, who is going to give you guys, or start with the overview.
I will be going through an overview of the professional development program for you today. The purpose of the Indian Education Professional Development Program that are relevant to this competition are to increase the number of qualified Indian individuals in professions in education that serve Indian students by providing training and support to become teachers and administrators in LEAs that serve a high proportion of the Indian students. We want you to be aware that while new regulations were adopted in February of 2025 that went and put NATRI into the PD program, they are very different grants. And this one is focused on training new teachers, and the other, NATRI, focuses on the retention of current teachers. This webinar today will be dealing with the PD training program, and NATRI is a separate grant than this one. The purpose of the Indian Professional Development Program, to be successful, every student should have access to an outstanding, well-prepared, well-supported educator who reflects the students in which they serve. The PD Training Grant Program provides critical support to increase the number of qualified Indian educators and administrators serving Indian students who can help meet the unique linguistic and cultural needs of the Native American students. It is the policy of the United States to fulfill the federal government's unique and continuing trust relationship with and the responsibility to the Indian people for the education of Indian children. The federal government will continue to work with the local education agencies, or LEAs, Indian tribes and organizations, post-secondary institutions, and other entities toward the goal of ensuring that programs that serve Indian children are of the highest quality. And the PD training grant programs can support multiple types of training to include registered apprenticeships, and we encourage applicants to consider creative ways to meet the needs of Indian students by identifying and overcoming barriers to training and supporting future Indian teachers and administrators. And now I'll go over a little bit of the grant overview for you. So here's a little snapshot. We intend to use an estimated $13 million for this competition. The actual level of funding depends on final congressional action. However, we are inviting applicants to allow enough time to complete the grant process. We anticipate that the estimated range of awards will be $400,000 to $500,000 for years 1 through 3, for every year 1 through 3, and that the average estimated size of that award will be $450,000 per year. If you carefully read the notice of inviting applications, You will note that year 4 and 5 are induction years, and those years are limited to $120,000 for every one of those final 2 years. And those ranges are estimated. You can certainly go ahead and ask for money over that, but that's what we estimate those awards to be at this period of time. The first 3 years of the grant are the training years, and then there will be 2 years where the grant can continue if you are making substantial yearly progress. All right. Our eligible applicants. An eligible applicant must be either an institute of higher education that includes tribal colleges and universities. It can be a state educational agency that is in a consortium with a higher education agency or a TCU. It can also be an LEA that is in consortium with an institute of higher education or a TCU. If you are an Indian tribe or an Indian organization that is in consortium with the Institute of Higher Education or a tribal college or university, you're eligible. And finally, the Bureau of Indian Education funded schools in consortium with the TCU is also applicable. And we will go over what makes a consortium agreement for those applicants that need to form them. There are some specific regulations in 34 CFR 75, 127 to 129 that outlines specifically what must be included in a consortium agreement. A consortium agreement is a group who will work together for the purpose of meeting the goals of the grant project. And in that group agreement, you must provide what every partner will be doing, what role they have, what responsibilities they have, and how they will work together to meet those goals. So if you want any further information on writing a consortium agreement, you can just look up that reference there to 34 CFR 75, 127 through 129. All right. So there was recently a correction notice published to the NIA on April the 3rd, and it gave a new date for a notice of intent to apply. If you submitted an intent previously, I have that, and I am looking forward to reading your applications. But if you have not sent a letter of intent and you want to, that period is open until April the 18th, according to the new correction notice. No applicant is required to submit a notice of intent to apply, but you are strongly encouraged to do so. You can go ahead and email those to me with the subject line of intent to apply and include your applicant's name and an email address. And of course, if you do submit an intent to apply, that in no way bounds you to go ahead and then complete an application, but it just lets us know that you intend to apply, and we can go ahead and watch out and make you aware if there's any further changes in those. But once again, it is not required that you do complete your intent to apply. For this grant competition, there are 2 absolute priorities and 2 competitive preference priorities that we will be working our way through. The first one is if your application seeks to provide the pre-service training for teachers. And to meet this priority, applicants must propose a project that provides support and training to Indian individuals to complete a pre-service education program before the end of the award period that enables the individuals to meet the requirements for full state certification or licensure as a teacher through training that leads to a degree in education for states allowing a degree in a specific subject area, training that will lead to a degree in that subject area, training in a current or new specialized teaching assignment that requires a degree and in which a documented teacher shortage exists, or training in the field of Native American language instruction. In addition, it provides induction services during the award period to participants after graduation, certification, or licensure for a period of 2 years while participants are completing their work-related payback in schools in an LEA that serve a high proportion of Indian students and includes goals. So these 4 goals must be included in your application project, and we call these our program goals because these are required goals for the program. You need to identify the number of participants that you want to be recruited each year, the number of participants who you will target to continue in the project each year, the number of participants that you want to graduate, and the number of participants who will find qualified employment within 12 months of completing their training program. So those are the 3 required areas for absolute priority 1. Now, absolute priority 2 deals with administrator training. So if you're an Institute of Higher Education or a TCU and you're going to train people to become administrators, you would be applicable under absolute priority 2. And this provides support and training to Indian individuals to complete and graduate with a degree in education administration that is provided before the end of the award period and allows them to meet their state certification and licensure as an education administrator. It also provides induction services during that award period for participants after graduation for a period of 2 years while they are completing their work-related payback in schools that are LEAs that serve a high proportion of Indian students. And they must also include those program goals with the number of participants who will be recruited to the program, the number of participants who will continue the project every year, the number of participants to graduate every year, and the number of participants that will find qualifying employment within 12 months of graduation. And finally, we'll talk about our competitive preference priorities. Under 34 CFR 75105, we award an additional 5 points to applicants that can meet competitive preference priority 1, or an additional 3 points to an application that can meet competitive preference priority 2. Applicants are eligible for points under either 1 or 2, but not both. So therefore, the maximum number of competitive preference points is limited to 5. Competitive preference priority 1 is that you are a tribal applicant, and tribes will either receive 0 or 5 points. If you are an application submitted under an Indian tribe, Indian organization, or a tribal college or university, you are eligible to receive competitive preference 1. And if you are part of the consortium agreements that we went over, to be awarded competitive preference priority points under this priority 1, you will have to be a tribal applicant. You just can't be a part of a consortium. And then competitive preference priority 2 means that you are a consortium applicant, but you are a non-tribal lead, and you will receive either 0 points or 3 points based upon your consortium application of the entities meets the requirements that we talked about earlier and is not eligible to receive preference under competitive preference priority 1. Now we're going to talk a little bit about our Government Performance Results Act measures, which we call our GPRA measures. The department has indicators of success for the PD program, and these measures must be included in your application, and we will look at them on an annual basis and at the end of your program to be ensure that you are meeting these measures and making substantial progress in your goals. If we look at the professional development GPRA measures, there are 6 of them. There are 4 that if you are absolute priority 1, that you will be responsible for. And then there are 4 of them if you are the administrator program or absolute priority number 2 that you will be responsible for. So the first one is the number and percentage of participants in administrator preparation projects who become principals, vice principals, and other school administrators in LEAs that serve a high proportion of Indian students. So, of course, that one is only applicable to those administrator training programs. Number 2 is the new teacher, for new teacher students, and that is the number and percentage of participants in teacher preparation projects who become teachers in LEAs that serve a high proportion of Indian students. Number 3 is a GPRA measure for all applicants, and it is the number and percentage of program participants who meet state licensure requirements. Number 4 is also for everybody, the number and percentage of program participants who complete their service requirement on schedule. Number 5 is for administrators, and that is the cost per individual who successfully completes an administrator preparation program and takes a position in an LEA that serves a high number of students and completes the service requirement in such a district. And finally, for teachers, the cost of the individuals who successfully complete a teacher preparation program, take a position in an LEA that serves a high proportion of Indian students, and completes the service requirement in such a district. These measures constitute the department's indicators of success for this program, and consequently, we advise an applicant for a grant under this program to carefully consider these measures in conceptualizing the approach to and the evaluation for its proposed product. Each grantee will be required to provide in its annual performance review and final reports data about its progress in meeting these requirements. And we just want to take a minute to remind you that we will be answering any questions at the end of our presentation today. So you can go ahead and add those to your Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. And now I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Sabas Burns, who will be going through the application requirements.
Thank you, Linda. These next couple of slides just highlight a couple of the application requirements. In this slide, you may recognize this. It's listed in the notice inviting applications, and it generally states for FY2025 and any following years in which we make awards, that we can take a list of unfunded applications from this particular competition, and we can fund down the slate is what we call it, meaning fund down until the money. If we happen to get some more money, we can use that to fund additional projects. And that's pretty standard in a lot of our NIA. So I just want to make sure that that's understood. There's a 34 CFR reference there that you may take a look at for additional information, but we often have questions on this. And so I thought I'd try to answer them right up front. A couple other application requirements within your narrative, and we'll be talking about that selection criteria in just a minute. But within your narrative, you're going to be talking and describing how you're going to recruit these Native individuals, such as students who may not be traditional college age, to become teachers, principals, or school leaders, if applicable. The use of funds made available under this grant is to support the recruitment, preparation, retention, and professional development of Indian teachers or principals in local educational agencies that serve a high proportion of Indian students, as Linda mentioned earlier. You're also going to mention how you can assist participants who receive pre-service training in meeting the payback requirements under 34 CFR 263.9B, if applicable. You're going to submit one or more letters of support from LEAs that serve a high proportion of Indian students, and each letter must include a statement that the LEA agrees to consider program graduates for employment, evidence that the LEA meets the definition of LEA that serves a high proportion of Indian students, and the signature of an authorized representative of that LEA. If you're applying as an Indian organization, you need to demonstrate that the entity meets the definition of Indian organization. If it is an effective LEA that is subject to the Elementary and Secondary Education Act of 1965, ESCA as amended, you will consult, and this is very important, consult with the appropriate officials from tribes or tribal organizations approved by the tribes located in the area served by that LEA prior to submission of an application. And as this is required under ESEA 8538. So make sure you're getting those approvals ahead of time prior to submitting an application. And then also you will comply with any other requirements listed in the application package. Awards that benefit Indian students are subject to the provisions of Section 7B of the Indian Self-Determination and Education Assistance Act, otherwise known as Public Law 93-638. And essentially, this gives Indians preference and opportunities for training and employment in connection with the administration of this grant, give to Indian organizations and to Indian-owned economic enterprises as defined in Section 3 of the Indian Financing Act of 1974, preference in the award of contracts in connection with the administration of this grant, and also for purposes of this preference, an Indian is a member of any federally recognized tribe. Here are a couple application submission instruction. We'll get into a little bit more detail a little bit further. But the application narrative is where you, the applicant, you are addressing that selection criteria that the reviewers will use to evaluate your application. So we recommend that you limit the application narrative to no more than 30 pages, and we'll use these following standards. And you can see there's 8.5 by 11, one side only, 1-inch margins, around double space, using fonts, in particular, the ones that are suggested. And there may be, in the correction notice, it could say that the narrative is no more than 50 pages. And that was something that we noticed. And if that is the case, you may write anywhere between 30 and 50 pages in your narrative. But I do suggest that you keep in mind your reviewers and the number of applications that they will be reviewing, and those with extra long number of pages. I don't know, it may be a lot. So just kind of keep that in mind if you decide to write more than 30 pages. You will not be deemed ineligible based on the number of pages of your narrative. However, just as a guideline, we say 30 pages up to 50 there. The recommended page limit does not apply to the cover sheet, the budget section, including the budget narrative, the assurances and certifications that we'll cover, or the one-page abstract, the resumes, the bibliography, the letters of support, or the signed consortium agreement. All those are not counted in that number as well. However, the recommended page limit does apply to the entire application narrative. Turn it to Amanda to go over selection criteria.
Yeah, Donna. Thank you. All right, so we're going to kind of go over the selection criteria. Applications will be rated on a 100-point scale. And so this next section will explain how the points are distributed. So next slide. So the secretary uses the procedures for establishing selection criteria and factors in section 34 CFR 75.2 through 75.21 to establish the criteria and factors used to evaluate applications submitted in a grant competition for the professional development program. The secretary may also consider one or more of the criteria and factors listed in paragraphs A through E of this section to evaluate applications. So A is going to be need for project. In determining the need for the proposed project, the secretary considers one or more of the following. 1, the extent to which the proposed project will prepare personnel in specific fields and which shortages have been demonstrated through a job market analysis. And 2, the extent to which LEAs with qualifying employment opportunities exist in the project service area as demonstrated through job market analysis and have provided a letter of support for the project. B, we're going to look at the quality of the project design, and this will receive 20 points or up to 20 points. The secretary considers the following factors in determining the quality of the design and the proposed project. So 1, the extent to which the goals, objectives, and outcomes to be achieved by the proposed project are ambitious, but also obtainable and address first, the number of participants expected to be recruited in the project each year. 2, the number of participants expected to continue in the project each year. 3, the number of participants expected to graduate. And 4, the number of participants expected to find qualifying employment within 12 months of completion. And so that will be up to 10 points. Number 2, the extent to which the proposed project has a plan for recruiting and selecting participants, including students who may not be of traditional college age, and that ensures that the program participants are likely to complete the program, and applicants will receive up to 5 points for this. And 3rd, the extent to which the proposed project will incorporate the needs of potential employers as identified by a job market analysis by establishing partnerships and relationships with LEAs that serve a high proportion of Indian students and developing programs that meet their employment needs. And so again, up to 5 points for this criteria. And C is the quality of the project services. So up to 20 points for this criteria. The secretary considers the following factors in determining the quality of the design of projected services. First one, the likelihood that the proposed project will provide participants with learning experiences that develop needed skills for successful teaching and or administration in LEAs that serve a high proportion of Indian students. So this will get up to 4 points. Second, the extent to which the proposed project prepares participants to adapt teaching and or administrative practices to meet the breadth of Indian student needs, and again, up to 4 points. Third, the extent to which the applicant will provide job placement activities that reflect the findings of a job market analysis and needs of potential employers and that offer qualifying employment opportunities, up to 4 points. And fifth, the extent to which the applicant will participate in meeting the service obligation requirements. I think I missed 4. So 4, the extent to which the applicant will offer induction services that reflect the latest research on the effective delivery of such services. So again, these are going to be up to 4 points. And D, adequacy of resources, so up to 10 points. In determining the adequacy of resources for the proposed project, the secretary considers the following factors. First, the relevance and demonstrated commitment of each partner in the proposed project to the implementation and success of the project for up to 5 points. And second, the extent to which the budget is adequate to support the proposed project and the costs are reasonable in relation to the objectives, design, and potential significance of the proposed project. And again, up to 5 points, so a max of 10 points. Let's see. And we got E, the quality of the management plan. And this criteria will receive up to 25 points. In determining the quality of the management plan for the proposed project, the secretary considers the following factors. First, the feasibility of the management plan to achieve project objectives and goals on time and within budget, including clearly defined responsibilities, timelines, and milestones for accomplishing project tasks. And you'll receive up to 9 points. Second, the adequacy of plans for ensuring the use of quantitative and qualitative data, including meaningful community members and partner input, to inform continuous improvement in the operation of the proposed project. And this is up to 8 points. And third, the extent to which the time commitments of the project director and principal investigator and other key project personnel are appropriate and adequate to meet the objectives of the proposed project. And this is up to 8 points. And F is the quality of the project evaluation or other evidence building. For this criteria, it can receive up to 20 points. In determining the quality of the evaluation or other evidence building of the proposed project, the secretary considers the following factors. 1, the extent to which the methods of evaluation or other evidence building are appropriate to the context within the project operates and the target population of the proposed project for up to 10 points. And second, the extent to which the method of evaluation or other evidence building will provide performance feedback and provide formative, diagnostic, or interim data that is a periodic assessment of progress towards achieving intended outcomes for up to 10 points of a max points of 20. All right, so let's take a moment so you can provide some questions or comments in the chat box below. Again, we're not going to be able to answer all questions. However, questions will be answered and posted on the OIE website. And I'm going to pass it back to Donna.
Yeah, thank you. Application instructions. All right, so when you're looking at the professional development application package, you're going to go to www.grants.gov. And that education grant opportunity number is very, very important because that's the easiest way to search for this particular application package. It will also reference a couple of the other NATRI, the retention grant that we will be discussing in tomorrow's pre-app webinar. But this number will get you to this recruitment application package. The following information being presented again, as mentioned earlier, this is an abbreviated presentation of that package, and it does not substitute reading its entirety. If there's anything, read that NIA from top to bottom, read your application package top to bottom. That will tell you pretty much almost everything you need to know. There's some department-specific application guidance, and we'd like to say within both the FY2025, the NIA for the PD, and the application instructions, you will find reference a couple of times in that NIA to the common instructions for applicants for the Department of Education discretionary grant programs. And if you guys, which I see some familiar faces or names, you may have used these in the past, I would like you to mention, please use the most updated link provided here as December 23rd, 2024, because they have changed. So please don't go back. Use this one to complete your application. The common instructions give detailed guidance from the SAM.gov to your UEIs, which is required from SAM.gov, and other common elements of the application. This next couple slides are talking about the different parts to your application checklist. It's recommended that your electronic application be organized in this manner. It will help with the peer reviewers in following parts in order to expedite their review process. Instructions for all parts and forms on the applications are found either on the next couple of slides we'll present in your application package, or individually for each form on www.grants.gov. Make sure you review your application package to make sure you have completed the following forms and sections. And especially when applying electronically via grants.gov, you will need to ensure that your UEI number that you enter into your application is the same UEI number your organization has used when it registered for the System for Award Management, or SAM.gov. This is a requirement and must be done. If you do not know if you have a UEI, you need to go to SAM.gov and check. If not, you need to apply to get one. Part one are the preliminary documents. You're looking at the application for federal assistance from Form SF424. You also have an Ed supplemental information for SF424. Part two is the budget information. The application consists of the budget form ED 524, and use the Ed form 524 in Section A. Section B is what we term non-federal funds are optional. Don't even bother that. You're using the Ed form 524B. Non-federal funds are often used for matching, and we do not do matching. So just do Section A. And as a reminder, in part of the form ED 524, you must provide all requested budget information for each year of the proposed project, which is up to 60 months, and the total column in order to be considered for federal funding. Let me repeat that because this is a question that comes up a lot. This is a 5-year grant. Those estimated numbers that Linda provided to you, that's for each year of the grant. So between $400,000 and $500,000 for each of the first 3 years of the grant. And then it's $120,000 for years 4 and 5, $120,000. If you are planning a full 5 years, make sure you're providing 5 years worth of budget. Thank you. Part 3 is the abstract form. Grants.gov may include a note that indicates that the abstract may not exceed 1 page. However, an abstract of more than 1 page may be uploaded, and we'll get into that in a little bit. Next slide. 4 is the project narrative, which is just that, answering your selection criteria. The part 5 is the budget narrative. Part 6, other attachments as needed, and we'll get into that in a second. And then part 7 are your insurances and certification. You have a lobbying form that needs to be filled out. There's a certification regarding lobbying form and a new GEPA, or General Education Provisions Act requirement as well. And we will talk about that as well. Okay, part 1, Ed supplemental information. When you open that SF424, you'll see this. It's a standard form and includes the corresponding instructions along with it. Just want to make a notice here, when you get to item number 9 in this section, be sure that the applicant type you identify in this form matches the one that you talk about in your abstract, because we do reference number 9 when we're doing eligibility screening, and make sure that they are the same. Part 2 of that form, section A, remember again, you must provide all requested budget information for each of the 5 years of the project and the total column in order to be considered for those years of funding. And this next slide kind of gives a screenshot of what that looks like. It's tempting to go back and want to make some last minute line item category adjustments to this budget chart, but you have to make sure that your narrative that you write, the budget narrative under part 5, is consistent with the final amounts in this chart, because this is the chart that we use if you're funded to determine your final funding levels. And so between the budget form and the budget narrative, there may be some discrepancies. Oftentimes people work on different portions of a grant application, and sometimes they don't always match up at the end when it's all put together. So just make sure that the budget information here matches what you have in your narrative. Okay, abstract, very, very important part of the application package. Again, we don't think it needs to be more than 2 double-spaced pages, but we are very specific about what we want you to include: of title of your project, the institution, the official name of the applicant's tribe or institution or entity who is submitting this application, the eligibility category, the partners, identify any of the consortium partners here. You'll identify your priority that you're writing to, any competitive preference priorities that your project may be addressing, a brief description of the proposed project goals and objectives, and indicate how many participants will be served. Great. Again, that note, grants.gov, may include a note that indicates that it is 1 page, it may be 2. Part 4 of the project narrative attachment form. And this is where you'll address some of those requirements that I mentioned earlier as applicable. And this is also, again, where you respond to those selection criteria. A couple comments again, just that we kind of already went over this, just a reminder, double space it, use these fonts, they're easier to read. 12 point, we don't particularly measure that, but we're just trying to give you some guidelines of how to not make your application narrative overly difficult for the reviewers. Part 5 is the budget narrative form. The budget narrative consists of the 5 pieces, essentially. You have section C of that ED form 524, which is the narrative piece. Be sure to complete an itemized budget breakdown and the matching narrative for each year of the proposed project up to 60 months. Please review and edit to ensure the total funding listed each year is in that form that I just showed you on that ED 524. Identify the nature and amount of those proposed expenditures and provide sufficient detail for readers to understand. Make sure that budget needs to be consistent with the proposed activities that you are proposing in your project. So not only does it need to be itemized, every activity, every travel piece, every part of your budget, but it needs to match the proposed activities that you are wanting to do. Part 6 are the other attachments, and this is kind of a catch-all. It can be for those letters of support, if you have an indirect cost rate agreement, if you have a consortium agreement, or bibliographies, resumes, CVs, any of those types of documents. You can even put your appendices in there. And so that's a catch-all for a lot of the other attachments. In part 7, those assurances and certifications. Don't forget this part contains these very important pieces that we discussed earlier for the disclosure of lobbying activities and that other certification regarding lobbying. They're 2 different forms, and the GPRA. We are also excited to announce this year that all the GPRA statements have been generically pre-populated for applicants to certify. And this reduces the amount of time spent on writing these GPRA statements as they have in the past. And that time saved can be spent, of course, on writing other higher quality applications, right? And that form is in the application instructions package. And it can be simply as copying the statement that we provide and putting it in its own document and uploading it in part 6, or it's signing it, the form that we provide to you and making that part of your application, and even checking a box if there's one of those available too. We try to really streamline this process for you. And this is what it looks like. So the box pursuant to section 427, this is the statement. This federally funded project will ensure access to and participation in activities that address the unique cultural, language, and educational needs of Indian students, teachers, and other program beneficiaries as defined in ESCA as amended. It is important that if you're choosing to do this form that you copy and paste this exact language. Eligibility and screening for the panels. So every application that we get will be screened for eligibility. The notice of ineligibility will be sent by email, hopefully within a week or 2 of submission deadline, after we've had a chance to review them all. And all eligible applications will be reviewed by a peer review panel made up of 3 panel reviewers. They're independently read and scored. There's a panel discussion that's held and facilitated by a panel monitor. And then at the very end, after all of the what we call technical review forms used to review applications, there's a ranking order that's produced of an average final scores that's determined by OIE. And then that's how we use to identify those with eligible applications and fund until the money runs out. Remember, this is a different deadline if you saw the first NIA published in January. We've extended it to try to give you as much time as we possibly can. May 13th, 2025. There is no flexibility on this date. There is no flexibility on this time. Grants.gov, if you've used it before, can be fickle. It can be a bottleneck. So I can't stress enough that you get these applications in as early as you can. It may be that that Linda spoke earlier, if you've already submitted that application prior to April 3rd, I'm very sorry, but you're going to have to resubmit a new one because they're not going to even open anything prior to that April 3rd date. So you will need to make sure that you are doing that by this May 13th deadline. And next, I will turn it over to Linda to talk about resources.
The final part of the presentation will be a review of the available resources that are made to you and some general tips for your submission. Be sure that you have read and reread the NIA that explains to you what and to what level your application should be written towards. Be sure that you have a copy of the application package and the application instructions, both before, during, and after your writing. Start if you need to get access to grants.gov or SAM. Be sure that you start that registration process early. Proofread your applications and submit it in grants.gov. But don't wait, start early. It is essential that you submit to sam.gov, and there's a lot of work to be done, so please don't wait until the last days to get that done if you're still at that step. And then grants.gov, if you run into any technical issues with submitting your application, please know that the competition manager will not be able to be of assistance to you, and you need to contact grants.gov directly. Their number and email address is located here, and contacting the program office will only delay your submission as they cannot support you with those technical issues. They can be reached at 1-800-518-4726 or emailed at support@grants.gov. We, of course, are holding this webinar for you today, and there will be an additional one on April the 16th. And we will have copies provided on our webpage to you. Both webinars will have the same information. The only difference will be the questions and answers that the audience gives at the end. You can also access requirements from 2 CFR Part 200, known as our Uniform Guidance, at the following links. And that last link is to some training that you are able to complete on your own time and has a lot of great information in it. You can reach me at my email address or Dr. Sabas Burns, our group lead, at her email address. And at this time, I believe Olani is going to read your questions that have been given, and we will answer what we're able to, and we'll provide answers on our website if we're not able to answer them at this time. All right, thank you. And thank you for all our participants for joining us today. And we look forward to working with any awarded grantee in meeting the goals of your projects. Have a great rest of your day.